So here we are, guys, taking a look at our settings real quick. I use TV pod instead of TV pod offset. I know a lot of people tend to use this, but I don't. If we take a look at our main settings here, which is the camera settings, this is what I use for all the cars at the moment. I haven't actually changed any of the other settings in terms of car specific. So once I've done that, I probably might make an updated video. I do plan on making an overall updated settings video around about December-ish time, once I've, had a while to play the game and really dial in my settings, but this is what I'm currently using for my camera settings, and I'll probably show pictures of other cars as well and how these settings look with different cars, so that you can see whether or not you want to use them or if you want to use something else. But yeah, moving on, we're going to take a look at the on-screen display, because there are a few important settings in here that you do want to change. The first one being full track map. You have to have full track map on because you want to be able to know where people are around you in qualifying, so that you're not impeding them, and also in the race as well. If you're racing close side by side with someone else and maybe you go for an undercut, you want to be able to know when they go into the pits, and the only way to do that is through full track map if you're just driving by yourself, like you don't have an engineer or anything like that. So very important to have the full track map on. And then another one that's really important actually is permanent session timer. By default, for some reason on the F1 games, in qualifying, it will only show you the timer when it's in the last 5 minutes of qualifying. You have to turn this on if you want to be able to see the time in qualifying for the whole session. Not really sure why they've made it like that, but they have. So make sure that permanent session timer is on. So for my next settings, we have the assist, which is very straightforward, because ever since I started playing this game in F1 2019, I haven't really been using any assists at all. So yeah, pretty much using elite for this one, but obviously there's probably some settings that you guys may or may not want to use. I would recommend probably turning off traction control in this year's game, because the traction is just a lot easier to do. It is more tuned to real life Formula 1 based on what the real life Formula 1 drivers have said. So yeah, I can recommend turning traction control off. If you're going to choose any year, it might as well be this one. Now, I want you guys to let me know in the comments if you do want to see any other settings that I have going on, but for now I'm only going to show you the ones that I feel are the most important. And so lastly, we're going to go into our force feedback settings. Now, I am using a Moza R5 wheelbase, which only works on PC. So if you have this, or if you have the R9 or anything like that, you'll probably be using similar settings to what I've got here. However, if you're using a completely different wheelbase from a completely different company, it might be a little bit different for your settings. So for our generic settings, there is something I want you guys to change in here, and that is the overtake ERS mode. Countless times I hear people, and even myself back in the day when I used to use toggle, would leave their ERS on overtake while going into a corner, and they would spin on the exit of the corner. Use hold, you will thank me later. And for our force feedback settings, for my control scheme, I have a custom control scheme. The way that they've set the button layout for this wheel and this wheelbase, really weird. So I went into the files and I've changed it. Very simple to do. Even someone like me managed to figure out how to do it. But yeah, you can only really do that if you're on PC. For the calibration settings, I completely leave these. I don't touch them. The only time that you really want to be changing anything here is if you find that maybe your brake pedals or your steering wheel itself isn't working the way that it should be. For example, if your brake pedal is constantly active, so if for some reason it's always registering that your brake is being used, maybe you want to add a little bit of a dead zone to help prevent that, so that you're not braking on the straights. Or for example, if for some reason your brake is not going to 100% on the brakes once you're going on the brake into a corner, then you might want to change either the linearity or saturation to help with that, so that you can actually brake at 100%. Same with the throttle and obviously the steering wheel as well. Now, finally, for my force feedback settings, one thing I will say is I did make a video on F1 23 before, and I did receive a comment from David Greco. If you don't know who he is the guy who is behind, well, the main guy who is behind the handling model. I don't know if he worked on this year's game. I think he did, but he definitely did work on the previous ones as well. And he said that for most wheel users, you don't want to be using more than 70 force feedback strength, or else you'll experience clipping and you won't feel as much detail in the wheel as you're supposed to. So for most people, you probably don't want to use any more than 70. Maybe if you have like a really weak force feedback wheel, like maybe the Logitech or maybe the T150 or something like that, maybe you want to turn it up a little bit more than that. But for most wheel users, don't go above 70. So yeah, I'm using 65 personally, and honestly, it feels really good on F123, especially with the new changes to the handling model. Now for on-track effects, I've kept that at default 50. You want to be able to feel as much of the details possible. You could even turn it up a little bit, but I've just left it at default. And for the rumble strips and off-track effects, I do have settings within the Pit House software that really do help with that, so I've kind of turned those down. And speaking of Pit House, I will have a link in the description or the pinned comment. It is literally just my Pit House settings in the form of a file. All you need to do is just download that and then import it into Pit House, and all of my settings will automatically load up. So if you're using a Moser wheel and you're using the Pit House software, there you go. For the wheel dampening, again, that's a part of the Pit House settings, so I don't actually have any wheel dampening on the game. And then lastly, for my maximum wheel rotation, I use 300 on the F1 games. I don't plan on using the supercars on this game, if I'm completely honest, so I've just left that at default. So obviously I did show you what my camera settings were, and I did show you a little bit of what they may look like on other cars. This is what it looks like on the Williams, just to end the video. As you can see, there you go. So that's what I see when I'm driving. Obviously I've got the track map a little bit up so that you can see it on the screen. You can see it above me on the video, or else it would literally be behind me on the video. So that's why I've sort of moved that up. Otherwise, everything else is pretty much default. And yeah, to be honest, I don't really look at the car when I'm driving. I look ahead of the car. So realistically, as long as it looks like this, you know, similar to this, my sense of speed feels all right, then I'm completely fine with any camera settings. But yeah, that's going to be it for this video, guys. Make sure to smash the like button for these settings. Obviously I will make an updated one later on in the year as well. I do want to thank everyone who's currently a channel member for helping support the channel. If you do want to support the channel past just watching, liking and subscribing, make sure to check the join button down below for more information, and I'll catch you guys in my next video.